Hello, YouTube listeners. You are all very special because you have the ability to like episodes right here and now. So please hit that thumbs up before you close the tab and get to your creative work. It helps out so much for the YouTube algorithm, especially as I'm starting out. So thank you very much for doing that up front. And don't forget that you can always subscribe on your favorite podcast app to listen on your phone when you're on the go. Thanks for listening to this episode, and I'll see you face-to-face on Wednesday right here on YouTube for my shorter, bite-sized dose of inspiration. Enjoy the show and create something amazing. Your Creative Push, episode 349.
If you are called to be creative, but you're too scared to do something about it, you're doing other people a disservice.
I got blood on my hands. I got blood on my hands. I took that shot steadily and killed the wrong man. I got blood on my hands. I had justice on my mind. But who the hell am I? All of my ammunition was just my goddamn ambition to do the wrong thing to make it right.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and you were just listening to The Wrong Man by my guest today, Suzanne Santo. Suzanne is a singer-songwriter from the band HoneyHoney, and she is also a solo artist. And that song that you just heard came from her solo album, Ruby Red, and she has an upcoming solo album as well, which we talk about in this episode. Suzanne also talks about the power of podcasts, one of my favorite subjects, especially Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell. We also talk about the creative process, and she explains how it's just as important to not write as it is to write, and why you should honor the process when you're getting constant inspiration, because it's so rare. She also talks about branching off from HoneyHoney to create her first solo album, Ruby Red, working with Butch Walker, having complete freedom, and also working with John Spiker on her new album, Suitcase. We also talked about a wide range of topics, including Catholic guilt, how she knows when songs are ready to be brought to the table, and where she finds inspiration when it's lacking. I had a great time talking with Suzanne, and I apologize for about the first 7 minutes or so of our conversation. The audio's a little bit shaky as we were figuring out our internet connections on both ends, so I apologize for that, but just bear through it because it gets better, and it shouldn't hinder you from enjoying this inspiring and entertaining conversation with Suzanne Santo. Enjoy. Suzanne, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for being here.
Taking the risk on me.
Stop it. Stop. No, I've been following you for quite a long time now. I think I first discovered you when maybe even the first time that you were on Rogan,
Awesome.
because I'm a huge fan of Rogan. And then you were recently on Duncan Trussell's podcast, and he's a hero of mine.
I love him so much.
No, I know. He is the greatest. But I was like, you know what? It's time that I reached out to you. So I sent you an email, and you got back to me right away. And here we are. So it's kind of an honor to. No, it is a real honor to have you on the show.
Oh, come on now. Thank you. I am such a fan of the podcast community. I think that this is our ticket to some maybe intellectual freedom, in the sense that you get to experience real conversations with people, and I always learn something new every time I listen to a podcast, even if I'm not jazzed about it. But back to the Rogan Duncan Trussell community, those cats are honestly changing the world. And the way that we receive information. And Duncan's a little more on the sort of psychedelic Buddhist wavelength, which is awesome. And it's been a really tumultuous end of the year, start of the year, and I've just been listening to Duncan's podcast a lot. And what's ironic is I didn't used to listen to it, but I ran into him in the grocery store the other day, and we were I hadn't seen him in a while, and we were catching up, and he's like, well, you have to come over and meet the baby. And then he's like, well, then you got to do a podcast. And then I've just been listening to his podcast since I ran into him at the grocery store. But anyway, I digress. They are also my heroes, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I completely agree with you, and not just specifically about those two, but just podcasting in general, and just the ease of being able to connect with anybody on the planet, as long as as you have an internet connection and they have an internet connection.
Yeah.
Just for any type of creative person, this is like the time of the universe. Like this is the luckiest time and the easiest time to be able to connect with someone, and then to either have a conversation or collaborate or whatever it may be, and then kind of broadcast it to the world, even if that means just creating something that's going to be company for somebody else, for a potential audience.
Yeah.
But no, I totally agree, especially when it comes to somebody like Rogan, who is unafraid to give their honest opinions. It's really inspiring for somebody like me, somebody who might not have people around them in everyday life that have like similar opinions, maybe opinions that you didn't even know that you had. It's almost like having like a second dad or a second parent, or just
For sure.
having that kind of intellectual support, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, 100%. It's a good time to, I mean, like, would you say the podcast is like probably in the past decade? Is that when it was sort of birthed?
I think so.
Longer than that? Right.
I mean, podcasts have been around since I think the first iPhone, maybe before that. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, they've been growing and growing in popularity, and as people kind of realize that they don't have to be told what they what they have to listen to or what they have to watch, and that they can actually find specifically like very niche down topics that they're completely interested in, and things that really motivate them. And I know personally for me, I took a 8-month break from the podcast, and
You have a baby?
no, I didn't. I suppose I could have though. No, I just had other life stuff, as well as burnout. But just, buying a house and all kinds of moving and everything
Sure.
else.
Yeah.
But the point I was trying to make was that in that 8-month break, my numbers actually grew. So that just kind of shows how, even doing nothing, people are still able to find podcasts, and it's just like growing as a whole.
Good. I think that, not to like totally just jump into it, but I've been sort of marinating on this idea right now, because it sounds like you've put in a lot of work on this podcast. You've been doing, you said somewhere around 300 podcasts. That's a lot. And I think, and I'm sort of saying this to myself as well, that you truly get back what you put out there. And I say that like universally, energetically. And when you put all this love and this hard work and sweat into your passion, there's also that like you have to sort of sit back and let it all kind of come back to you instead of like chasing it, you know? So like you getting burned out, I actually really identify with that right now in my life. And there's also this like fear of like, oh my God, well, I have to like release control and let the universe come back to me with all the work I've put into this. I have a new record, and wait for it to happen, and not necessarily wait, but let the fruits of your labor kind of ripen on their own, which is something that I've never really done before, but I'm starting to witness it now. And then you're surprised by it. You're like, oh my God, okay, this makes sense. Like I put all this time in, and now it's coming back, and you sort of feel like it's like a magical happenstance, but really it's because you put in all that work. And it's just
Right.
like boomeranging back to you.
Right. And it's really important to have a reset sometimes,
Yes.
because you're going along, and you're putting in the labor, like you said, and the time and effort, and sometimes you literally need to get distance from whatever your not real baby, but whatever kind of baby you're birthing into the universe, creatively speaking, because
God.
it's really easy to become numb to it.
Yes, and it's really funny that you just say that, because my best friend was just over here, and he was so like I went to the Grammys this week, and I went to all these like high profile events that I always feel like an imposter at. And I'm like, I kind of felt like a big loser at the Grammys. at like, it was like, I felt like I was in high school or something. And not that I want that to be the barometer of my happiness or success, but I couldn't help but feel that like comparison rising up in me, which is hard for anybody, But my friend was like, Suze, like, remember, basically, like, I'm releasing a record. And he used the birth metaphor. And he's like, you're just so vulnerable right now. He's like, you're giving birth while you have the flu. Because I'm going through all this stuff. And it's funny because I think for anybody, whether you're an artist or you're a mother or a father or a teacher or whatever, when you're in that sensitive state, whatever it may be for you, like, you should remember to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, it is so important to be kind to yourself, especially when the creative process it's a very vulnerable thing. It's a very vulnerable place to put yourself in when you're writing, when you're kind of bearing your soul. It's so important to, as you're doing that, to kind of be a friend to yourself, because that's when you're going to get the truth out. That's when you're going to kind of find the truths out about yourself.
Yeah.
When you maybe go down to those depths, you need to be able to bring yourself back up.
Well, I've realized it's just as important not to write as it is to write.
What do you mean?
Well, in terms of practicing, that's a whole nother ballgame. Like, if you want to be really good at guitar, fucking practice every day.
Right.
Practice hours a day. If you want to do it for a living, you have to practice hours a day. With writing, you have to like break through barriers, when you have like, you're not achieving the lyrical, bar that you want to get to. I set timers a lot. I'll put in my like hour or two when I'm sitting and working on a pre-chorus or something or a whole song. And then like, it's just as important to like get outside, be with your friends, go on a date, get drunk, have your life experiences, go to TJ Maxx. Like you have to be out in the world to find your inspiration. And you can also channel your shit, but you have to do both. So when I start to drive myself crazy because I'm just stuck in a corner and I can't get out of it, I like go out or I take a walk or I do whatever. And I just get outside of writing, this is sort of going back to what we were talking about with podcasts and how you took a break. You're not really taking a break. You're just incubating something, and then you're doing your caretaking or you're doing whatever you need to do to like live your preferred life, optimum level happiness.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like incubation, not just for ideas, but also like motivation and like that energy that you like kind of need to spur forward on a project. And I've found that like anytime I've taken a break from writing or from podcasting or fill in the blank music, I come back when I do decide to come back to it, or kind of like my body forces me to come back to it because it's like it's got that energy again. It's always like from a different angle, like a new kind of perspective. Like, so from when I'm coming back to the podcast on this particular break, like I have like new taglines that I've just like thought up in my head. Like,
oh yeah,
it's coming from like a different place. And also like I want to make videos now. I want to make like bite-sized like doses of inspiration. And for a long time I was trying to write like the Your Creative Push book. And I think because it was such a big project, and also because I love writing, that I thought that I needed to write a book. Like clearly I need to like put everything that I've learned into lessons and put those lessons into like a formula for getting past the creative process. But like it's not really like that, because I've came at this like whole like creative battle from like a different perspective now, like a talking out loud perspective and having conversations with other people. And it's like that's the way that the kind of ideas want to come out. They don't want to come out through the written word. So it's like kind of trusting that voice and that angle when you do get those ideas, like what's the best way to put them forth.
Oh yeah, and like have that like grace for yourself, like this is my shout out to like people that are too hard on themselves. Like, you like, you have to give yourself the room to formulate those ideas. And if you're like, pedal to the floor and you're just like, go, 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 go. I mean, sometimes you can get through your blockages or whatever in that gear, but like, you can't always go that way. You got to do both. But like, there's a fine line between taking breaks and being lazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so like when you talk about, there's the need to write, but then there's also the need to not write and like get out. What happens then when you are like kind of like infused by the spirit? Like when you get like, when you want to pull an all-nighter, when you want to be like writing and writing and writing and it's coming like...
Oh, then I just do it.
You
then
just
like,
do it and cancel everything else?
Yeah, green light. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's also part of this ethos that I really apply to my life, which is divine selfishness. Like that's me taking care of myself. Like it's a weird job, like this is my job. So if I'm on a roll and I'm not honoring the role, then I'm not doing the thing a disservice, or I am doing the thing a disservice because it's not always there. It doesn't like every time I sit down, I don't write a song I'm like over the moon about. Sometimes I do. So that's amazing when you can sit down and write a song in one sitting. It's like so meant to be. But a lot of times you have to really chip away and sit with it. And it's almost like I have an invisible dry erase board, and I know the ideas, and they're always kind of kicking around. But yeah, I mean, you have to honor that. And I think that when I say divine selfishness, I mean like care for myself first so that I can care for others in the most fruitful, loving, effective way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like the airplane analogy. Put the oxygen to your face before you help the person next to you.
Yeah, well, that's if you want to get smushy about it, it's like
smush away.
You can't love somebody else if you don't love yourself.
Oh yeah,
and I believe that like to my core.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to writing your own music, and when you were writing the songs for Ruby Red and branching off away from HoneyHoney, what was that experience like? Because I imagine that when did HoneyHoney start?
Like 12 or 13 years ago.
Right. So when you've been doing kind of going along like, a musical or whatever kind of artistic path and kind of been living through that narrative. And then when you branch off and do your own thing, what was that creative process like and not just like for writing, but just like the mindset, like when literally the world is your oyster, like you can do anything you want. You don't have to like stay within any type of narrative that you've been living before, creatively speaking. What was that like? Did you find that to be difficult or like liberating?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was equal parts liberating as it was like absolutely terrifying, because it was such a reassemblance of my identity, because I was in HoneyHoney for so long, and Ben Jaffe is still one of my best friends, and the band is not dead, but we were so just ridiculously codependent on each other in so many ways that like our art suffered because of it. It also thrived because of it. So it was this really interesting double-edged sword. But we got to a point where it was so toxic for us. And we were a couple towards the second half of the band. And that was also like just a whole nother can of worms. And stepping away was like, all the questions like, am I any good without this person? What am I without this person? Who am I without this person? It's like any relationship or marriage. And we like to joke that this was our first divorce. I mean, I literally saw him last night. Like he takes up a very large portion of real estate in my heart and soul. Like he's a huge part of my life still. And it's great to sort of go through that gauntlet of toxicity and come back with a healthy perspective and still have love for one another. And we've both sort of done the work on that front. But with that said, my music was a huge releasing of that. And it was so incredible to see what I was without Ben and what I was capable of. And I, honest to God, like, it shocked the hell out of me. Like, I was doing string arrangements. I was producing, and, you know, to no fault of Ben, because he always supported, like, you know, he had my back. But the fact is, he worked a lot faster than I do, and he worked a lot faster than I did, and so I would always kind of get pushed to the back while he'd be at the helm, just going, because he works at a certain speed. And, you know, in all transparency, with a lot of the people we've worked with over the years, I was always the only woman in the room. And that was hard because, you know, people expect you to not be driving. And when I stepped away from this codependent thing that I have a lot of gratitude for, I did my first record with a producer named Butch Walker. And no one had ever really given me the floor like Butch did. He literally, it's like, I can see it in my head. Like, we had like rolly chairs in his studio, and he like moved to the side and like slid the rolly chair into the center of the console. And he's like, all right, you're driving. And I was like, oh my God, you know, and I really surprised myself with what I was able to do. And it continues to grow in a way that, like, I just want to get better at it. And I'm also so grateful that I have the skill set that I have. And I really did put in my time, and I'm going to continue to do so. But the departure from HoneyHoney was like leaving the womb, you know, and this thing that wasn't broken, but it was broken. You know, it like we have had this pact that when it started to become not fun, we'd have to put it down. And that's what happened. But like, it's not down. It's just in like timeout.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that way, was it like a catharsis?
Oh, yeah. But it's like, you know, it's a breakup record, but it's like a breakup record with myself, you know, a version of myself, like one of the lives I've lived in the many, many lives that I've lived. Like I said earlier, I don't like to talk about the songs, but I will say that I have a song called Ghost in My Bed, and like, I'm the ghost, you know, like we can haunt ourselves. And that record is a very seminal part of this whole life thing for me.
Definitely. And that's one of my favorite tracks on the album, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Butch Walker, I remember buying Left of Self-Centered, like back when I don't even know how old I was, but like that was a soundtrack to one of my summers. Like, well, so he's kind of a legend. And what was it like working with him? And then that being said, when he kind of gives you the free reign, what was that like?
I mean, it was incredible. He's still a really good friend and mentor. You know, I talk to him almost weekly, and it was a really like kismet. Like, you know, when you like, I don't know, hear me out here, but like, have you ever met people in your life that you're like almost unnaturally drawn to, and it's like you feel like you know each other, that kind of thing? It's like, oh, there you are. Jesus, where have you been?
Yeah, like my buddy Jeremy, with like the very first time I met him, I'm like, we're gonna be friends.
Yeah, yep, that's how I felt with Butch, and I think creatively the record exhibits that, you know, because we really worked so well together. And I first worked on his record. I met him on my birthday. I was playing a show in LA opening for JD McPherson, and I met Butch. I had a bottle of tequila under one arm and a cake in my other. And he's like, hey, I'm Butch Walker. And I was like, man, I know who the hell you are. And he was like, hey, I loved your fiddle playing, your banjo playing. Do you want to play my record? And I'm like, probably never going to hear from this guy. And he totally called me. And then a few weeks later, when I was back in town, I worked on his record, and I had so much fun. And I was so scared to ask the question of, hey man, I've got these songs, and I'm thinking about doing a record, but I'm like really freaked out. Would you like want to maybe produce it? And then he did, you know? But anyway, like he is unlike most producers I've worked with, in the sense that I'm going to say it's really hard to find people that are secure with themselves and that don't have an ego and that genuinely want to make great music and do what's best for the song and not like put their spin on it. to feel better about themselves. He's not that guy. And I have been used to that for a long time. I've been used to going into a studio, like, you know, armed and ready to defend, which is no way to make great music. It really sucks. But it's also good to know what it's like, know what that side of it is. So working with Butch was like night and day to a lot of things I've experienced, and it really set me free. And I'll be eternally grateful to the man for giving me that opportunity.
And then whenever you get that type of freedom and you don't, like, all of a sudden, like, you can kind of unclench when you're so used to, you know, being ready to have to, you know, like you said, fight. Did you find yourself kind of setting too ambitious of goals or anything? Like, when you say that you had to, like, you got to do stuff for yourself, like mixing, and did that end up being like more than you can chew, or was it like, did you enjoy kind of chewing off that learning process?
No, I loved it. I mean, I was stepping outside of my comfort zone and then like discovering all these other things I was good at. And it was a fucking blast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, I can take on too much, but this was a really like, I think there's one song that didn't make it on the record, but like, I didn't go in with too much stuff that I didn't know what to do with. And I never really do that. I usually have just the right amount of songs. Like, I don't bring them to the table unless I'm like, this is a fucking smash.
And how do you know that?
I get a physical reaction. Like, I get goosebumps when I sing it or listen to a demo that I make. Mm-hmm. If it makes me feel emotional, I know that it has something special. If it makes me like cock my head to the side and be like, huh, then it's not good, you know?
Right. Okay. How long do you sit with that to gauge whether or not, because like I feel like sometimes for me, definitely, and for a lot of people listening, they sit with ideas for a really long time. Like, that incubation period lasts like way too long, and they let the kind of voices in their head convince them that it's not worth doing. And whether that's just like, you know, a fear-based thing, or if it's like a way to kind of get yourself off the hook to actually like kind of put in the work, you know what I mean, to create it. How long do you sit with those ideas?
I have a pretty like good gut feeling, but I also like this new record I'm almost done with is called Yard Sale, and I'm working with this producer John Spiker, who's just fucking phenomenal. I'll text Spiker my demos, and we pretty much agree on everything, which is pretty cool. And he's a really good friend of mine, and he's a very similar to Butch in the sense that like no ego, just such a positive, like, I have a blast with Spiker every time we're working together. He's literally one of my favorite people on the planet. He plays bass in Tenacious D and like, you know, produces all these bands that I absolutely love. That's how I like to work with producers. They become your sounding board, and they'll say, hey, that's great. You know, maybe work on that last verse, or like, I think the pre-chorus could, this or this. And you know, that's where that cookie crumbles. But you also, you know, you kind of have to have your trusted sounding board too. That's a key element to that whole fear thing of like, okay, I really trust this person's opinions. We're collaborating. If they feel like this is off, I'm going to trust them, and I'm going to see what else I can do. But you know, I don't like deliver a song that like, if the bones aren't there, it's not worth sharing. You know, like sometimes. Like there was a couple songs on the record that like were like 90% done. I sent him over and I'm like, yeah, I got to rewrite that pre-chorus. But other than that, I think we could really set this track down, this, and this, and then come back to those lyrics later. That's nice because you have wiggle room. You don't have to like, there's not a gun to your head to, you know what I mean?
Right.
Send it away. Fully polished.
Right.
Waxed and polished.
Yeah, and I think that's where like you said, like having a sounding board is really important and also really rare when you're able to not just trust somebody like to give your ideas to and to like ask for their opinion, but when more times than not, they're right. When you can look back in hindsight and say, like, the comments that they made sense, and audibled and went a different way, and it was a success because of that. Like, when you can get that, to like really embrace it and to like hold on to them and to like use them, like not be afraid to, hey, you gave me solid advice in the past, like let me use that. It's rare for people to get that, because like so often people just want to tell you, oh, it's great.
You think so?
I think it's really rare. Yes. I think that most of the time when you ask somebody what they think of something, they're going to tell you that it's good. At least from my conversations with other creative people. Yeah, like a lot of times when you put something out there, you just get kind of positive feedback. Unless you put it on YouTube, then you get only negative feedback and people telling you. But
well, haters don't hate. But I think and I have reverence for that too, because people that like to do that, they're just hurting and they want attention. And
yeah,
I think that I try to set my life up in that way with friends and lovers or whatnot, and business associates. It's like, hey, like you better shoot me straight, because I have a pretty solid bullshit detector. So like if you're, just placating me, I'm going to sniff you out,
right.
And I like, I don't know if that's just like part of my natural DNA, but I do like all my friends, like people that I spend the most time with are those kind of folks. And especially artistically, like I like one of my best friends her name's Casey. She lives in New York, and I pretty much send her almost every demo I'm working on, and she will be brutally honest, and I love it.
Yeah, you need that. Well, and I think the reason why I say that it's rare is because also a lot of I know a lot of my listeners are afraid to share what they're creating, or they're hesitant to share what they're creating. And especially people like starting out, it is a tough thing to put yourself out there because you're afraid of, the rejection that you might get, but it's also really important to get honest feedback. So it does take a little bit of practice.
If you want to look at it this way too, because that's also your ego, the whole like acceptance thing and like, is this good? But the fact is, whatever it may be, whether you're writing a think piece on gray whales or you're...
Have you done that recently? Like, where did that come from?
I just went whale watching last weekend, and there were gray whales.
Awesome.
So that's what just came to mind. I don't know. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
Made me feel
that is cool.
like a speck of dust in the universe, which was a really cool feeling.
Definitely.
Whatever creative thing you're tripping up about, I feel compelled to say, if you can, get over yourself and get it out there. The world needs you. Like, we need to be inspired. We need to inspire each other. Even if it means you fall on your face, figure out how to get up and keep going, because write all the songs and the poems and the ideas, because it's a fucking weird place right now. So if you want to look at it like, if you are called to be creative, but you're too scared to do something about it, you're doing other people a disservice. So find the mission and execute the mission, even if you fall on your face.
It's very synchronistic that you said that, because earlier I was saying how, coming back after a break, I have new taglines and stuff like that. My new tagline is the universe deserves your creativity.
We're done.
Wow. Yeah, so I think it's so important, and the second part of that is you are the universe, because it's like you're not just helping the universe figure out like what the hell is going on, but you're also helping yourself determine where you fit into this crazy existence that nobody really understands.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you feel like you're taking it all on by yourself. Again, it's a very egotistical, narcissistic thought. But the fact is, you're not. You are part of something, and I'm on that same wavelength with you about the universe. And the more I embrace that, the less afraid I feel, the less alone I feel, and the more purposeful and worthy. We're all worthy, every single one of us. Like, otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
I could not agree more.
And it's so funny to really like to break that down, because we're so conditioned to not feel worthy. I was raised Catholic, and I remember like thinking, because it's like, if you like the rich man, your way into heaven is if you get rid of all of your things and sell all your wares, and you're not worthy unless you're in rags. It took me a long time to deprogram thinking that I had to have nothing to be worthy. It took me a long time to not feel like I was working if I wasn't running around a dining room or pouring drinks at a bar, which are things I love to do too. You know, they're a huge part of who I am. But the fact is, you don't have to suffer to receive. I mean, we will have to suffer at some point, but it's at many points, but it's not the prerequisite in terms of like, all right, you're going to have to break your legs in order to run, you know?
Right. No, 100%. The Catholic guilt still has its grip on me in certain aspects, but it's like a shedding of
the worst. It
is.
The cold that we caught. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's like, I get, you know, finding whatever spiritual practice brings you peace and harmony. And I don't want to, you know, shit on somebody's Catholic parade, but I also want to shit on your Catholic parade.
Right.
It's a really tough one. It's, you know, Duncan was talking about this on their podcast. Oh God, I can't remember the guy, but he was talking about one of his gurus being an asshole and how it really helped him with his Buddhism and his understanding of what Buddhism meant to him. And I made me like flash back to, so I grew up, my parents owned a restaurant that my grandparents started, and it's very Italian, and it's in Cleveland, and our parish priest, Father Bob, would come in, and he never had to fucking pay for a meal. Like, he ate for free. And he was such an asshole. He was just a like repugnant son of a bitch. Like, he was just and I remember being scared of him and being like, oh, Father Bob's so mean. He always made me feel so bad. He like, I'd clear his plates and fill his water, and he would just like gruff at me, wouldn't say thank you. And even as like a 12-year-old, I was like, that's fucked up. He's the priest. He's supposed to be spreading the word of God. And in my interpretation, that's like love and light and joy. But my God, this guy was just a dick.
I remember the very last time I went to confession. I don't know. I was probably like 14, and I forget what I confessed, but it was not a big deal. And and the priest essentially like told me if I continued doing such activities, like if I continued in my sinful ways, I'd be destined for hell. Like, that was pretty much how he said it. And I was just like, as a kid, just remembering
that's so dangerous.
That is so bad. I was like, that was dirty. That was the last time I went to confession. I was like, I don't think that's what this is all about. So
that's so fucking dangerous, because we put so much faith in these people, and they're just people, and they're people with their own bullshit, and also they're, you know, pedophiles, or they're whatever. Mm-hmm. They're, you know, it's a very dangerous line, that whole religion thing.
But it also, like, not just sin or no sin, it's like it gives, and I think a lot of, like, whether it's like a religious upbringing or not, I think a lot of us are brought up in the way that, like, we're afraid to make mistakes. And mm-hmm. I think that's really dangerous too, because mm-hmm. especially in bringing it all back to the kind of the creative process, like, it is important to make mistakes. Like, you have to see what doesn't work, and you have to just like put a lot of stuff out there. And out there doesn't have to be like social media. Out there is just like in your sketchbook, or like, you know, in Microsoft Word, or on the canvas, or whatever it is. Like, you have to put a lot of garbage out there. Mm-hmm. Like I said, like, to figure out what your existence is all about. Like, why do you think that you're here? Like, what message do you have to learn? Like, what do you have to like give to other people as well? And when mistakes are looked down so much, and especially in this like perfect kind of social media, like cookie cutter, like Instagram photos, like perfect filters, like edited podcasts, everything like that, it makes it really hard to start out and to learn something and to learn about yourself. It's really scary.
I mean, when you feel like, oh God, I can never make a mistake, just never forget that Mick Jagger and David Bowie did Dancing in the Streets. Watch that music video.
Oh my God.
And you'll be like, okay, I can make mistakes too.
We have found the golden takeaway from this episode. Oh my gosh. I was gonna ask to play some of your music on this podcast, but we might have to play that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's what's gonna happen.
Oh my God. That's so awesome. I have one more question for you before we let you go, because I know that you are facing traffic, and I'm sorry to do that to you.
She's a feisty bitch, that LA traffic, but it's okay. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying this.
Good. Where, aside from like your own experiences, your own life, like where, and aside from TJ Maxx, like where do you find inspiration? Like when you are lacking, like when it's hard to write, or when you're not kind of feeling it, or you're in a rut, or you're in a block, what do you do?
Books, 100%. Like good books, movies, podcasts. Whenever I'm feeling like insecure about myself, or just like, all the things that we feel, when I read a book and I'm like expanding my vocabulary, there's nothing that fills me up more than like learning new words and coalescing with a story and like just diving into something. A couple years ago, I was really, I was just in a place. I was transitioning into another level, and I was sad, and I always thought it was a joke, but like not a joke, but like I read the Harry Potter series.
Nice.
And it is one of my favorite things I've ever read. I canceled on people all the time because I couldn't put the books down. I fell in love with the similarities to my belief system through like the magic of these books, and also was just amazed at how it really echoed our reality.
Mm-hmm.
In this magical, fictitious world that became so real to me. And I like will forever be so grateful to where it brought me, like start to finish, after I read all the series. And then I went through like a small depression when it was over, because I'm like, now what the fuck am I going to do? What's going to top that right now?
No, that's completely understandable. That's what good art does. Like what another person is able to bring to other. It's like a gift. I had the Avatar blues. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but after seeing Avatar, I had I think that's the term for it, Avatar blues, where like I just wanted to live there. I forget what the planet's called.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. I totally get it. But I will say, like, I stand by that when you find yourself stuck and depressed and just like needing, just get a book, get a fucking great book, and you'll feel so much better about yourself, especially when you're increasing your intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
What better way to pick yourself back up than to be like, oh my God, I just got smarter.
Right.
I think that is a very attractive quality, and it is something that I really try to do for myself as much as possible. It makes me feel so good to read books.
Excellent. Yeah, it's definitely good to be able to escape whatever you're what's holding you up, what you're constantly thinking about, and to be able to escape into a different world is definitely the answer, because then you're able to come back with armed with something new, hopefully, but also like a kind of a reset.
Yeah, you communicate with people differently when you're inspired.
100%.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
Well, I appreciate you taking me to a new universe and taking me, giving me an escape, and my listeners as well. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm really grateful that you wanted me to join the podcast today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And we always like to end with what I call the final push.
Okay.
And that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and to grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Oh, okay. Be so nice to yourself. Just be good to yourself. And then also be a fucking badass.
Yes, that's like my favorite. I love that. I love that final push. It is really important to remember to be nice to others, of course, but to give yourself that kindness, especially when things are tough.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Suzanne, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you. I really can't wait to meet you sometime.
Yeah, next time I'm in LA.
All right.
Huge thank you to Suzanne once again for coming on the show. One quick note here at the end. I want to talk about creative roles. And not like your role as an artist. I mean like being on a roll, being on a streak, when the inspiration is coming at you full force, when the muse is right by your side or right in your ear or right in your brain, and the creation process comes easy to you. These are rare experiences, as you probably already know. It's the thing that you kind of crave to get in that zone. But like Suzanne said, you have to honor that when you get it, and you have to treat it with respect and as like a gift from the universe and jump on that train. It's like a disservice to not dive into that creative vortex, so to speak, where you kind of just jump in and let it take you for a ride. But that being said, you have to put yourself in the position to be able to honor that creative role by sitting down and doing the work, by sitting down and being sort of an open vessel for that experience to happen. But that is easier said than done. I realize that. And just for context, this episode came out in the first few weeks of the coronavirus pandemic. And if you're anything like me during this time, you felt like you have all the time in the world. There's no end in sight as far as when I can go back to work or when all of the kind of life responsibilities are going to come back to me. And that overabundance of time can make it sometimes even more difficult to sit down and get to work, to sit down and put yourself in that position that I was talking about. You can always do it later today. You can always do it tomorrow if you're not really feeling it. But it's almost like all this extra time that we've all, or most of us have gotten, goes almost faster than when you have a busy life and time is less available. So just be extra mindful of where your time's going during your day. Be extra vigilant about keeping a calendar and keeping a schedule, keeping track of where your hours are being spent so that you can spend it on the things that you care the most about or the things that you want to try out more, or just the simple act of giving yourself an hour, 2 hours to sit down and get to your creative passion, to put yourself in the position to get one of those or many of those creative roles going. On our next episode, we have one of my heroes, James Gurney. James is the artist and author best known for his illustrated book series, Dinotopia. He specializes in painting realistic images of scenes that can't be photographed, from dinosaurs to ancient civilizations. And he comes on for a powerful episode. James has been doing what he's been doing for years. He is a pro, and he doesn't just rest on his laurels. He dives into YouTube. He dives into all of the new technology that's available to all of us. If you want to find out more about James, you can head to his website, jamesgurney.com, or you can find him on Instagram, James Gurney Art, or his blog, gurneyjourney.blogspot.com. Or, of course, we'll have that all listed at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/349. Or you can subscribe to the new newsletter, where you will get a weekly email complete with that week's episode, that week's YouTube video, other resources that I've found that I've shared throughout the week on Facebook and Twitter, as well as a preview of the following week's guest. You can subscribe to that at yourcreativepush.com/subscribe. But that's all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. Put yourself in that position to get on a creative roll. And we're going to leave you with another song by Suzanne Santo in its entirety. This is called Ghost in My Bed. I love you all. And remember that the universe deserves your creations, and you are the universe. See you next week.
There's a ghost in my bed, screwing with my head, stomping around my room, drinking all my booze. He makes me toss and turn, my stomach turn, and he laughs at me, thinks it's so funny.
Hey YouTubers, if you like this episode, I handpicked another one for you. I think you'll like it just as much. Just click it right there on the left side of your screen, and on the right is a playlist of episodes from guests that came from the same creative field as the one that you just listened to. And please don't forget to hit that like button on your way out before it goes away. Enjoy the next episode.